Oh, okay. Welcome back to the Inside the Ring podcast. I'm your host, Conrad Jack, joined by fellow host Chris Lavalley. Chris, how are you doing?
I am fantastic. Excited to be back, and a lot's happened.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, Jade is not with us this week as she's caught in traffic coming back from a Kraken game. And, well, I think that epitomizes with what the week has given a lot of people. It's very cold in Manitoba. I'm sure it's cold for you as well, for your climate and all that. So yeah, no, there's a lot to get through. There's a lot of interesting hockey stuff to talk about. There was a signing this week, and it seems like trades are going to start trickling out. So without further ado, let's hear a word from our sponsor, DraftKings Sportsbook.
DraftKings Sportsbook is Boston's hometown sportsbook. It's live right here in Massachusetts. Bet local on all your favorite sports from the comfort of your own home with DraftKings. To celebrate, all new customers will receive up to $250 in bonus bets when you sign up for DraftKings Sportsbook using code ITR. You can now bet local on moneyline spreads, props, and more with one of America's top-rated sportsbooks. That's DraftKings Sportsbook. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Sign up with the code ITR to get up to $250 in bonus bets to use now that mobile sports betting is live in Massachusetts. That's code ITR, and it's only at DraftKings Sportsbook.
If your loved one is experiencing problems with gambling, call 800-327-5050 or visit helplinema.org to speak with a trained specialist free and confidentially 24/7. Must be 21 plus. Physically present in Mass. Eligibility restrictions apply. Subject to regulatory licensing requirements. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply. Opt-in required. Bonus issued as free bets. Terms at DraftKings.com/MA.
Okay, well, when I'm not burping up a lung over here, we'll be doing good. But first on the dock for you and I, Chris, is the Minnesota Wild and Nashville Predators fight night. Why don't you take it away?
So we talked about it, I think it was 2 weeks ago. We knew this game was coming. When
Oh, yeah.
LaRue got suspended, I literally said right to you that this game is 2 weeks away. It'll be Saturday night. And, of course, I was a little busy Saturday night watching my football team get eliminated. So Sunday morning, trying to avoid all football that I could, I watched the highlights of the game. And I didn't realize, I expected, I think, more chaos than what came, but everything happened in the first period. And I don't know, did you see the highlights or did you watch the game at all?
I wasn't able to catch it as, like I said, is very cold in Manitoba and vehicle issues don't really give me a lot of time for hockey some days.
So the first fight, as expected, was LaRue.
Okay.
And again, I told you I'm going to butcher some names while we're doing this until I figure them all out. But was it's Trinan? Is that his last name?
Yakov Trenin.
Yeah. Okay. So Trinan.
Okay.
They fought within the first almost less than 2 minutes of the game.
Okay.
And if you watch the clip, I did not expect what transpired. So I don't know if there was conversation before. I don't know if there was comments post game from the last time they played, but LaRue went straight for him in the corner, threw his gloves off, went straight at him, and obviously they fought. Very surprised. I mean, I wasn't surprised who the guy was for the Predators to have the first fight of the game. I was surprised how it started. So
All right.
obviously, if you have a chance, go watch that because it was very interesting.
You have my interest peaked right now, so I certainly will.
But not even 2 seconds after, literally the very next face-off after that fight, there's another one. It was Luke Shen versus Marcus Foligno.
Okay.
So then, literally, I think all three fights were within 7 minutes of the opening puck drop. The third one, which a little interesting, Mark Jankowski fought Ryan Hartman, and Jankowski actually left the game and didn't return with an upper body injury.
Okay.
So I saw a report today that he was not practicing as well. And I don't think they're they play today. I think it's tomorrow. So not practicing sounds like he might be dealing with something and he might not play. But it was, I literally only watched the highlights of the first period because I knew something was coming. And as I looked at the score sheet, I saw there was only penalties in the first period for fighting. And so once I saw the last one, I cut away from it. But like I said, the first fight, did not see that coming with how it began. I saw the fight coming, but it was overall a great game. And as I've watched more of it now, and the Predators, we had this conversation before we came on about teams that could turn things around shortly. The Predators have been playing some better hockey as of late.
I see. My whole thing is if the Predators wanted to be in that position to compete like they supposedly are going to, and I've seen, like, you're not the only person I've seen write this or even heard of like say this, is the way that the standings are built is Nashville should be a lock to miss the playoffs as of right now. Just with how everything is in the standings, is there's realistically only 2 or 3 teams in each conference that you can say are a lock to miss the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
Nashville is teetering on the top rope, like it's the Royal Rumble, to say like, hey, yeah, they're out of contention. But that's my opinion on the whole thing. But I don't know. I think 10, 11 points is too much of a gap to even consider, unless they go on a blitz run like they did last year, 16-0-1. That was incredible. But with a lot of teams that I see, even at the American Hockey League level, if you can replicate that success 2 years in a row, you got a really good team to build off of. Nashville, with how much turnover they've had and how much they've added, they, like you said, they got a lot of talent. They've, like, that elite level talent that you need. Realistically, are you looking at that paper and saying, "Oh, are they going to finally figure it out more than halfway into the season?" Because if they wanted to figure it out, they needed to figure it out 20 games ago.
The thing helping them right now is everybody above them is struggling. And I just pulled it up so we can start with the Flames, who are the last wild card spot right now. They have the same record as the Predators in their last 10.
Okay.
Same as the Blues, who are, let me scroll over for a second, who are 3 points behind the Flames. Everybody else ahead of Nashville has a worse record in their last 10 games. So the door, yes, is the mountain to climb overwhelming? Probably. But is there the door open for the possibility for them to make not a run they did last year, but a somewhat similar run now that it seems they've figured out the line combinations a little bit more to get things gelling? And they're, like I said, they're playing better hockey. You know, they made their moves, backup goalie. I think right now the top line is actually Forsberg, Stamkos, and Marchessault. So, you know, they're getting things figured out, whereas before it was Marchessault was on the third line. I think Stamkos was line 2, and you had O'Reilly and Stamkos, Forsberg line 1. So things are being pieced together. They're working it out. There could be a move made, obviously, like we talked about a couple weeks ago, where that could be a thing where there's a team, what team could make a move that could get them somewhere. Nashville's moving into that situation where they could be a team that becomes a buyer. And like you said, there's really 2 to 3 in each conference that is out. So does that, you know, cause concern for the trade deadline where teams aren't going to move as many guys as you would expect because the door's so wide open everywhere?
I also think, like, kind of going on to that trade deadline stuff, and we'll talk more about the trade deadline a little bit later. But the whole thing about that is every team has to make a decision about a week or two out from that deadline, are we selling? Are we buying? Or are we conservatively selling? Are we or are we just going like fire sale? And we'll talk about a fire sale later. Because when we look at the league, we don't know what's going to happen. And a topic that really wants to burn in my stomach right now, but I'll leave it for next week, is how the salary cap in like even next season will affect this year's trade deadline. Because I think that's a massive factor. Is teams are going to look at what they have next year and what are they going to be willing to give up now, because they're not looking at long term anymore. If revenue's up and all that sort of like mumbo jumbo, like I said, I'll leave it for next week. But also, you have this point of teams might not even be able to decide, because they might be saying, "Hey, we're only 4 wins away from tying that wild card spot," and a team can go on a 4-game losing streak easily. Any team can.
Let's just put this out there. So I pulled it up. The Predators have won 3 straight. They beat the Golden Knights, the Blackhawks, and then the Wild on Saturday. Their next 5 games: Sharks, Ducks, Canucks, Sabres. They're 12 points out. Realistically, they could go at 4-1, 5-0. The Canucks are the only team that really, to me, stands out as it's an iffy game. And like I've said, I don't know if I said it when we started going live or if we said it before we were live, 3-5-2 in their last 10.
If I'm Nashville going into that stretch, I'm looking at that saying we have to win 4 of those 5 games.
Mm-hmm.
And the must-win game is against Vancouver.
Mm-hmm. And after that, going into so that's the end of January. And then just to throw it out there before the break for 4 nations: Penguins, Senators, Blackhawks, Sabres. So add those 4 games in. Realistically, if you go 6-3 at worst, you're back competing.
Yeah. See, my whole thing with the Predators is, like, as a coach, is with all these new additions that you have, every other team has made new additions, subtracted, and done all that stuff in the offseason. That's what the offseason's there for. Most other teams already have 25 games ahead of you to figure out what's worked. Some teams have had the whole season to figure out what works. Because, say, a team like Winnipeg didn't really make a whole lot of changes up front. They added a couple of pieces, brought a couple of guys back, and that's about it. So that brings up in my mind is how much can you do to your roster without making a ripple effect when you have a ripple effect that causes you to do so poorly for so long in the season that when you try to when you start to figure it out, you're already so far into the season that, like, do we sell? Do we buy? Like, what are we doing here? Because Nashville, if I'm Barry Trotz, am I going into work 3 weeks away from the trade deadline and saying, man, I should really add to this team?
Which he said he wanted to do.
Yeah.
So they've made moves earlier this season, like Tomasino.
Tomasino, yeah.
Moved to Pittsburgh, and obviously they made the goaltender switch. And I believe there was another trade that they made.
Justin Barron and Alex Carrier.
Yep.
I think I might have butchered that, by the way.
But that's another move that I was thinking of. And, he obviously said he wants another second-line center. So I think right now, like I said, I think realistically, if they go into the 4 Nations break, and we'll talk about this, I think, in a little bit, but if they go into the 4 Nations break and they're only 4-6 points out, they're making a move. And they're going to look whatever way they can to make a move to make them better before March 7th.
And I think, like, just to wrap this up, because this has gone on a little bit here, but if Nashville loses 2 games in this next 5-game stretch that they have, and if those 2 games are not, or if one of those 2 games are not against Vancouver that you lose, I think they're out.
Yep. I think that's the deal breaker right there.
Yep.
If both are to the Ducks, I think you're for sure done, because that's a team that you have 2 games against that's sitting 3 points in front of you. You lose both of those, now you're what? Did I say 3? Yep. So 7 points behind.
So yeah, the games against Anaheim are a must-win.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you lose even one of them, it's already a big enough hole to climb out of.
You need at least a point.
Yeah.
In the second one. So if you win the first one, you need at least a point.
So yeah, there's a lot there, but kind of going or keeping in the Western Conference, it's the Edmonton Oilers. They signed John Klingberg, who just had the hip resurfacing surgery, similar to what Patrick Kane had. Or not similar, it's the same surgery. But yeah, Chris, I like it. I think it's a low risk, high reward signing, in my opinion.
I agree 100%.
Because if Klingberg even shows a flash of what he was in Dallas, he immediately goes into Edmonton's top 4 and he upgrades them for free.
And looking what they have already, it's a steal. I mean, the contract is perfect. Adding all the bonuses in to what he can do is the perfect contract for them. And you add him in with a guy like Bouchard and Ekholm and Nurse, and that it's scary. If they're gonna make the playoffs. So come playoff time, you add a guy like Klingberg. If he's, again, it's a difficult surgery, so who knows what to expect. But if he comes back like Kane has, and he plays at that caliber of level, then Edmonton's going to be scary. And they might even, honestly, with him coming back, I think I saw a week before he starts skating.
Yeah, something like that.
So realistically, probably a month before he's actually game ready, maybe 3 weeks. That's enough time. They might pass Vegas and win the Pacific.
You never know.
They're tied going into tonight. I think Vegas was actually up last I saw. So could open the door. We avoid Edmonton, LA in the first round of the playoffs this year.
Although, I do like the Edmonton LA one. It's a bit of a rivalry, but I get why people don't like the current playoff format. Maybe we'll talk about that when playoffs get closer. But I like the way that it is. It's building rivalries, and we're having, we have the same competition every year. And then, say Tampa and Toronto, you see the bad blood that spilled over in 2 straight years where Toronto triumphantly went on to the second round only to lose to Florida in 5 games. So you have little things like that. It's the game within the game.
And I love the rivalry, but I like the idea of adding, because you usually get it in the first round. I like the idea of adding to it where they're playing in the second round for a chance to go to the Western Conference Finals. That's so where I like about avoiding the first round. Let them play, because Doughty's coming back. He's back skating. Let him play in the second round, and let the rivalry brew a little bit more.
Yeah. And then another thought that I had about the Klingberg stuff with Edmonton is, do you think they're too offensively inclined in their game with how they're built?
Yes, especially on the blue line.
Okay.
They're very, you could tell based on their defensemen that they're very offensive defensemen.
Because I'm looking at the way that the Oilers are built, and I'm just saying, you know what? I don't think this team, if you remove anybody from this team, that is one of the higher scores. In this case, it's McDavid, who just got suspended for 3 games. like how hard of a hit does it do to your lineup? Like,
They have enough talent there where I think that, granted, taking McDavid out is a big loss. I mean, there's no player that they don't have in their lineup that's going to replace that. But they have enough talent where you can move Nugent Hopkins up to that first line and have him with Draisaitl, and they're going to be okay. They're still going to score. I mean, Draisaitl's, I think he's the league leader in points. So they're going to be fine. They're still going to score. The only issue I really have is the goaltending. It's Skinner and Picard, and Skinner's been struggling here and there. I forget off the top of my head. I saw it earlier when I was doing one of my previews, but I think they're 8-2-0 in their last 10. But I thought Skinner was the one that keeps losing in the 2 losses they have were Skinner. And I thought it was more than that, but maybe I'm wrong.
I can't speak to that. So
I might be thinking of somebody else, a different team.
Yeah.
But they're hot. Like I said, they're a team I see winning the Pacific. Especially, I just looked it up. Vegas lost in overtime or a shootout to the Blues tonight.
Yeah.
So the door's open for Edmonton to take first place tomorrow. And then you're adding Klingberg in 3 weeks.
And if he, like I said, if he gets to even a shadow of his former self, great.
Yep.
But on Friday, I listened to 32 Thoughts, and Elliot Friedman brought up, and Kyle Pikoskis, they had a really good conversation about how John Klingberg, he's a player who relied on his mobility a lot. And he's a player who lost his mobility. So is he going to get that back? We'll find out. Like, realistically, is if he didn't bet on himself in free agency a couple of years, a team might have been looking back on that saying, hey, what did we do? What kind of contract did we just give this guy? So,
to me, it's the same as Patrick Kane last year.
Yeah.
It's just the question of how does he bounce back, like you said?
Yeah. And a few years ago, I remember when Pat returned, and there was just so much buzz. I think, I don't want to say for sure where I saw it, where I heard it, but I saw it on somewhere that I watched, and it was saying about how, this is such like a really brutal injury to come back from, and this surgery is not fun, and we don't think Patrick Kane will be the player that he once was. And then that same season, I watched him in Winnipeg. I went to a game with my brother, and I'm like, no, this, like, he looks good. You can tell he's aged, that he's had this surgery, but other than that, he looks like he's back on all fours.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm thinking. But, like, at this rate, I don't know. Klingberg, it's so hit and miss because I remember when he signed in Toronto, and he was supposed to be a great defenseman then, and who knows? Maybe he'll revive his career in Edmonton, have a good like a good few send-off seasons.
Yep.
So that's what we're hoping, at least.
Could even win a cup. I mean, they were there last year, and they could very well make it back.
I don't see why they wouldn't.
I could name 2 teams I could see staying in their way, but
outside of Vegas, I don't see a team that does.
Winnipeg.
With the way that Winnipeg has played in the playoffs in the last 2 seasons, I don't see why they would continue their regular season success into the playoffs. That's why I'm so hesitant to say Winnipeg.
I think you say that more as a fan, but I see Hellebuck looks a lot better than he has this season. Like, he looks more dialed in, that I think he could make a different run this year.
When you say, you say that as a fan, but, like, Hellebuck won the Jennings and the Vezina last year. He looked incredible last season.
He's probably
His
going to win again this
numbers
year.
spoke for themselves. He's likely going to do it this year. He's a Hart Trophy candidate this year. But when the walls collapse in on itself, they collapse in on itself. Like, that's where we are with Winnipeg.
Mm-hmm.
And I know this whole topic isn't about Winnipeg, but, like, with the way, like, in the Vegas series, Morrissey goes down, and you don't have a bona fide number 2 defenseman behind Morrissey. Last year, there wasn't a lot of injuries. It was just the way that the team played. They collapsed on their own. Hellebuck even said in the post-series press, or whatever you want to say, or end of season media availability, whatever you call it, that he put a lot of pressure on him. Himself. So maybe he'll put less expectations on himself. We'll see where things go there. Now, my whole thing is, from the fan standpoint, it's different than somebody who's seen on the media standpoint. Because if I were to look through either lens, I'm going to say with this team, they're capable, but they're going in and they have to have a chip on their shoulder. They have to know whoever they play, whether it be Edmonton, Vegas, Dallas, Minnesota, Calgary. They could even play Chicago, and they have to have a chip on their shoulder. That is how they've played in the last 2 playoffs. You're eliminated in 5s, and even with the additions you made in Toffoli and Monahan, you still get stomped in 5 games last year. So Winnipeg's a team that, I know you say, oh, they got a lot, like they could really do it, but outside of regular season success, we saw Boston win 65 games in 2023, and they lose in 7 to Florida. Playoffs are a whole different animal.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows, maybe this will be a clip that we post all over social media, say, oh, Winnipeg in the conference finals. Look how wrong Conrad was. And I would love for that to be the case, but as of right now, that's how I feel about Winnipeg in the playoffs. And speaking of playoffs, I think it's kind of the right time to revert to a lot of the fun parts about playoffs and heading into things. But talking about the in-season tournament, I guess you will say, is, could the 4 nations face-off be a trade deadline before the March trade deadline? And realistically, it could be one of 2 trade deadlines that we see. Chris, I'm going to start off with you. Is it a yes or no for you? Do you see this being the first of 2 trade deadlines?
I could see it, but I think if we get to, when's the first game of the 4 nations?
February 20th, I believe. 20th or 22nd.
That's the first game? I thought it was like the 12th. Why did I think it was earlier in the month? Because they go on break the 9th. So
okay, live Google search. Live fact checking with the ITR people. 4 nations face-off.
So realistically, I think if there's not a trade made by the first game.
I was wrong. The first game is on the 12th. You were right. But the tournament ends on the 20th. That's where I was getting mixed up.
Okay. So if there's not a trade made by we'll say the 13th, because that's when U.S. plays Finland, then I don't know how many moves will be made throughout the break. If there's at least one move made before that, then I think you could start seeing the floodgates open. It's one team's gonna make a move that opens everything. But if everybody kind of says, I don't want to make that deal right now, I think they all hold off till March 7th.
Realistically, I don't see the NHL allowing a trade. Like, say if there's a player in the tournament, getting traded to another team. I don't see the NHL making that be the case because it would be such a big deal on trade deadline day. Then again, with the way that things are going with NHL content creators and all that, I don't want to say for sure, but that's where we are. Or that's where we are as on the podcast, and that's where they are with how they're doing things. I think in the case of the Four Nations, like you say, one trade could spark something. But I don't think it, like, if it's a trade where, a seventh defenseman is traded for a fifth round pick, that'll be something that just happens. But
So
if
going to
it's
be
something
a
where,
significant move, not overly significant, but something like that moves the needle a little bit, where it's like a team looks at it and they go, oh crap, we're chasing this team and they just got a little bit better, like not a significant difference to their roster, where they say, okay, we need to go do something, even another small significant move. And that's where I think you're going to start seeing those moves. I think the big moves will still be March 7th, but I think you can still see some smaller moves that makes teams better going into that before then.
well, it's like, for example, it's last year. I remember when Elias Lindholm got traded to Vancouver, and I was driving out. I think I was going to Steinbach to get Chica's chicken, and my buddies and I were driving. Whole trade breaks. We get our food and we drive back because a lot of writing to do about it and break it down and do all that fun stuff. But that was way in January, and I remember people saying this is going to be the trade that just blows everything open, and then there's nothing on deadline day. The whole thing with deadline day is GMs are like, some of them might be a little antsy. Just they might be looking at what other teams have done and say, you know what, I think we got to do one more move. That's why I love trade deadline day. Maybe we have 2 days like that. Maybe the NHL says, hey, yeah, here's a quick roster freeze for 2 days. And teams are like, oh no. And does something like that. I don't think they'll do something like last minute like that, but that's just me kind of spitballing here. So, do you have any more thoughts about that, Chris?
I don't. I think it's going to be, obviously, that Sunday. I think realistically, if you're going to see a move, you could see it done that Sunday with only 2 games on.
Oh yeah,
but it'll be interesting. We'll see what happens.
And we, like, with the way that the NHL kind of functions, is they do not like the spotlight taken off their big tournaments that they host, and especially during playoffs, is if you have moves to make them after. Don't have it during the series and all that. All the eyes have to be on what's going on game-wise. So that's just another thing to keep in mind.
So, part of why I say if there's not one done by that Wednesday or that Thursday, now the tournament started. It's like you don't want to draw away from what's going on.
Absolutely. So kind of moving on here is, let's go on to the who's hot part of things, and that's the Washington Capitals. Chris, I'll let you take it away.
I mean, realistically, they might run away with the President's Trophy. I know right now it's only 2 points, like it's still close, but they are red hot. They're 7-0-3 in their last 10. And just for significance, I pulled this up earlier. Logan Thompson, in his last 10 starts, is 9-0-1 with a .948 save percentage and 2 shutouts. I mean, I don't know about you, but I did not have him on my big note card as being one of the best goalies in hockey at any certain stretch throughout the whole season. The other name is Jakob Chicken.
Jacob.
23 points in his last 26 games. He's third in goals for a defenseman this season. I mean, and the fact that I think I saw it the other day, I don't know if it's still the case after the last couple of games they played, but Ovechkin being out as much as he was, and he's still the leading, or he was the point scorer. Maybe it's just goals now, but yeah, leading goal scorer for that team. The amount of time that he missed, he's the leading goal scorer for the team that's leading the President's Trophy standings right now. And every game that I watch them, they just look better and better. I mean, we've had this conversation. I know you and Jade had it before I joined. Ovechkin might break the record this season if he keeps playing the way he is. And the addition of Pierre-Luc Dubois looks really good for that team. I mean,
you want to talk about a guy who's like, if you want to talk about a player who's single-handedly reviving his career in a positive way, it's Pierre-Luc Dubois right now. And just the way he's been playing in in Washington is great. I said Ottawa because I'm looking right at Ottawa.
It's wild to me. Like, Tom Wilson got hot for a while stretch there where Ovechkin was out. I mean, I feel like every time I tuned into a Capitals game, Tom Wilson was scoring a goal. And then Ovechkin comes back and they're clicking on all cylinders again. So they're going to be a problem. Lindgren looks good as well. I mean, he doesn't have the numbers that Thompson does, but especially as of late. And honestly, with what they have coming up, they have Edmonton Tuesday, so tomorrow. Potential Stanley Cup matchup. Kraken, Canucks, Flames, Senators to wrap up January before starting February with Winnipeg at home. So they have a good stretch coming up. We'll see, if they can continue their point streak. Yeah. But they look very good.
And in the case of Washington, I'm going to talk about Ovi for a minute because that's where my mind is, and I have a thought that I want to get out. Is you have the whole Four Nations freeze, and it's like an 8 or 9 day shutdown or 2-week shutdown, something like that. You have that shutdown. 21 goals away from breaking that record. Can you argue that most of Washington's success is from the addition of Logan Thompson? And I'll get into a story in a second about Thompson here. Is it the addition of Thompson? You bring in Dubois for a goaltender who's also doing really well in LA. So it's not a terrible trade for either team.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that you have kind of retooled this team is you've made it less about, let's break the goal scoring record and let's still be competitive while we do this. Because do you think Alex Ovechkin wants to be a part of a miserable rebuild?
No.
Absolutely not. Especially not when he's 21 goals away from the goal scoring record. He's not sitting here. He's not going to be sitting there and saying, I'd love to help this team in the future and see what they have in store 20 years from now. What he's saying, as selfish as it sounds, because I would be the exact same way, is there's a goal scoring record and I want to break it. He's looking at the goal scoring record and he wants to break it. I don't want to say because I have scored 0 goals in the league. Let's be real. So there's a correction there. But he's looking at it and he wants to break that. Once he breaks that, if they go into a full rebuild next year, he's going to support it.
Mm-hmm.
As much as he wants to compete for another cup. He's got his cup. He wants the record. He's so close to it, he can taste it. Let's be real.
It's going to be beneficial to him that he's not playing in the Four Nations. So he gets 2 weeks off to rest.
Exactly.
And he's going to be firing when he comes back.
That was going to be my next point with him, is with the Four Nations stuff is I'm at that home game in Winnipeg, March 25th. I have my ticket for it. I bought it a couple of weeks ago. And I said, you know what? Against Winnipeg, that's what he took lone place of second or the lone holding for second place. And I think he's going to take the holding for first place in Winnipeg. And it's a piece of history I'd love to see, but
You're
if it
making me
doesn't happen,
You're making me debate going April 1st.
you think it's April 1st, eh?
They're gonna be at the Bruins, and just you're making me think about it. It's 3 games after that Winnipeg game.
If we're looking at how many games out that he is, like, if I'm counting right now, it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 11, 13, 14, 19, 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. He's 26 games out from that Winnipeg game. That's where I lie. It only takes a couple of hat tricks to break that down, and who knows, maybe he does it at home.
That's kind of the way I think it might just be something he does at home.
Because you know for a fact after that Four Nations break, he's going to be rejuvenated. He's going to be looking at it, and he's going to look like he did at the start of the season. Like Chris, I truthfully believe that if he wasn't hurt, we might be talking right now as he's 1 or 2 goals away, not 21 goals away.
I don't know about 1 or 2, but I definitely think we're talking about it could be before the Four Nations.
Yeah.
I think we're talking about right before the break. He could be doing it.
Well, and kind of getting back to the whole Capitals thing is, did you watch the draft in Vegas?
No.
Okay, well, Logan Thompson, who was a Vegas Golden Knight goaltender at the time, was traded to the Washington Capitals, and it happened at the draft. And they booed Bill Daly out of the Sphere in Vegas. I don't want to say it was great that they booed him, but like the reaction that I got from the crowd was just amazing. As you can tell, Vegas loves their hockey, obviously,
Yep.
and the whole thing with that is not even 15 minutes after that trade, Logan Thompson has to go out and do a signing and has to sign these photos and talk to fans. So the second that trade broke, because I wasn't going to go to it, the second that trade was announced, I was like, all right, I can watch it on the live screen, like the big screen that they have in the lobby of the Sphere. And I got in line for this signing, and I was like, okay, this is great. And I went up to him. I was like, oh, so Washington, eh? And he's signing photos, obviously in a Vegas jersey, but like all these poor fans are bummed out and all that because they thought he was going to sign a huge contract or something and stay in Vegas, but that's the nature of the business. But you can see how cutthroat business is in that case.
Yep.
And so moral, like not moral of the story, but like the whole thing with that is, for me, it's like I hear Logan Thompson's name and I'm like, Vegas, like I feel like Vegas could have gotten more with 2020 hindsight, but there's a lot there. He was loved by the fans too. Like it's obvious in the reaction they got. So I think with that kind of said is staying in the Eastern Conference, but also talking Western Conference. The Canucks and Devils are potential trade partners. Well, Chris, on this one, you have written down JT Miller and Dougie Hamilton.
So I saw it over the weekend, and that I saw that was possibly a thing that was going on. I believe I don't know how to say his last name, so if anybody sees this and knows who it is, apologize for me. But Matt Marchese of Sportsnet He said there was a lot of noise surrounding the Canucks, and he wondered if there was a deal between the Canucks and the Devils that could involve JT Miller and Dougie Hamilton being the primary pieces, but there would also be some maneuvering going on between the two teams with everything else. So, I mean, the Devils, I know you wanted to talk about it. You know, they're currently on a skid, and you had mentioned as well there's a potential shakeup coming, maybe. So I think we tie it all into one. This could be a move that helps both teams.
See, my whole thing with the Devils is I'm going to call myself out again on this, but last season I thought they were going to be the President Trophy favorites. It was the Rangers, as we all know. But in my case, I looked at how they're built, the coach that they had, and just what they were doing as a team and how much adversity they had faced. And I was like, you know what? Fine. I can see why they could make that run. Lo and behold, they missed the playoffs. They didn't even sniff the President's Trophy. I don't see them making that big of a move on their roster. But then again, I look at their past seasons and how much they've struggled. And I wouldn't be surprised if they try to massively shake up that core that they do have. And why not get a very intense competitor like JT Miller into your locker room? You fill a need. You could really use a good top six forward who's a known competitor. He loves that. He loves the intense competition. New Jersey just might be the perfect fit for Miller. You never know. Dougie Hamilton fills a need for Vancouver. They need a defenseman. They need a top defenseman.
It makes a lot of sense. And they just got Hronik back as well.
Yeah. Even if Dougie Hamilton's on that second pairing, if your first three defensemen are Quinn Hughes, Philip Hronik, and Dougie Hamilton, that's a pretty good 1-2-3. Let's be real. Now, if you look at the way that the Devils have slumped, are you confident that they could? Are you confident that they can make a trade of this caliber and execute it to what we would expect it to be?
Yeah, I think if they make this trade and they do things the right way with the line combinations, they could be competing with the Capitals in the second round of playoffs to be going to the Eastern Conference Finals. I mean, right now I'm watching the Hurricanes game, and they got to make a move as well, or else they're in big trouble because they don't look that great tonight. And they haven't looked really, from what I've seen from the couple games I have tuned into them, they don't look that great. I mean, they could be in danger of going on a skid and falling with Columbus as hard as they are. So the trade deadline is going to just be chaos all the way around, I think. Especially, I mean, we're talking about Canucks and Devils here. Those are two teams that right now in a playoff spot probably going to make a move. This is a move that I think would help both teams.
Now, do you think that JT Miller would waive his no move clause for New Jersey?
That's the $1 million question.
Yeah.
I could see it. I don't know.
Because we're outsiders looking in. We're not GMs trading guys. So that's the whole game within the game here.
Mm-hmm.
My whole thing with that is New Jersey is close to New York. You don't know what New York was willing to give up. You don't know what New York was saying, we're not giving this up. New York, like the Rangers itself, it's a mess over there. The Islanders even, they're not even looking all that great right now. So if I'm waking up tomorrow and there's no movement on a JT Miller trade, I'm not surprised. That's where I stand.
I'd be interested to see what the other moving pieces are in that kind of deal, because obviously from what it says is it's not 1-for-1. So
yes, yeah.
obviously there's the conversation of what are the other moving pieces, and like you said, is JT Miller accepting the move. So it'd be interesting to see what's the full piece, the full package.
Yeah. And see, I don't have more thoughts on that. And I mostly want to get onto this next topic, and that's about Kyle Dubas reported to be having a fire sale in Pittsburgh. And, well, I don't look at their roster and see a piece that stands out other than the big guys, that it's going to cost you an arm and a leg.
I don't know about that. I could see somebody like Rust or Glass getting moved.
Well, yes, but
it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, I know what you mean with Carlson, with Crosby, Malkin, Carlson, and Letang.
And I would say maybe, like, because the whole thing with Carlson is, Pittsburgh would be willing to retain if the price is right. Because they already got 1.5 retained when they acquired him from San Jose. Now this is a situation where, okay, the more you eat, the more you can ask for. In the case of another team wanting a guy like Crosby, truthfully, I don't see that happening unless he himself says it and it comes out as a for sure.
And we all know if he does, it's Colorado.
Oh, Colorado, or maybe he calls his shot. If it's not Colorado, I'd be very surprised with the whole McKinnon connection.
Yep.
But yeah, like the way that they're built, I don't see it being as big of a fire sale as Dubas is making it out to be. I can see it being guys like Rust and Glass. Graves is a guy, he's going to be trying to move. Marcus Pettersson he's got a lot of smoke around his name forever. Jerry just went down to the minors. Maybe a team takes a flyer on him that has space.
Yep.
It's like, if Edmonton could afford it, they'd take a flyer on Jerry.
They got a chance. I mean, so I'm looking at the Penguin schedule. They got a chance that by February 1st, they could be having a whole different conversation on a fire sale. I mean, tonight's tough when they got the Kings, but they're on that West Coast trip. So they got the Ducks, Kraken, Sharks, then Utah. That's another team. You come out of that 4-1, you're not having a fire sale.
Yeah. Well, see, fire sale is such a different topic to kind of have, but like in this case, we know Kyle Dubas can be aggressive in trades when he wants to be.
Yep.
We've seen it before. We've also seen him be a little more conservative in that regard. Now, I'm not alluding to him being any sort of conservative in this case, but when you have notable reporters and insiders say, like, hey, there's a good chance that Dubas is going to have a fire sale. Like, is it, like, to me, when I hear or even read that, I'm thinking, hey, are they going to trade 6 guys off their roster, or are they going to move a couple of guys for futures? Like, what are we calling a fire sale here? So ultimately, I think that comes down to whatever Dubas interprets as a fire sale and what he's giving the reporters and insiders. And kind of going back to a team on a skid here, that's the Detroit Red Wings. Chris, I'll let you take it away.
So the Red Wings dropped 2 games over the weekend after we all know they were red hot. They were outscored 9-2 in those 2 games. And they faced 2 teams that currently hold playoff spots in the Lightning and the Stars. 2 games that you really needed points in because everybody around you is red hot except for maybe the Bruins. I mean, looking at the standings right now, Columbus is 7-2-1 in their last 10. Montreal 7-2-1 in their last 10. Rangers 6-1-3 in their last 10. The Flyers are 5-3-2. So all the teams that you're chasing have winning records except for the Bruins in the last 10 games. You have a winning record in the last 10 games, but those 2 games that essentially were games you had in hand from the teams that were above you. I mean, some teams I think you had 1, some teams you had 2. Now you're all pretty much even. I think you have 1 game in hand from the Flyers and 2 from the Bruins. 2 teams you're not even, that aren't even in a playoff spot. But if you came out of the weekend with 4 points, all of a sudden now you're 1 point behind Columbus for the final playoff spot. The real issue from the weekend and what happened with that team is the power play. The power play was red hot with their win streak. This weekend, they went 1 for 9 in both those games.
Did any changes happen on the power play, Chris?
Not that I had seen. I mean, from what I
Okay.
had followed from all the people that I followed for the Red Wings, I didn't see any big changes. I wouldn't be surprised if we see one heading into tomorrow. But going 1 of 9, not ideal. It was also the first game since Derek Lalonde was fired that they had scored less than 2 goals.
Okay.
So, and that was Derek Lalonde's last game, which came against the St. Louis Blues. Ever since Todd McLellan's taken over, they've scored 2 or more goals. And honestly, as of late, I think they've actually scored 4 or more, and like 4 of them. I'm pulling up the schedule right now as I say that. So they beat the Penguins.
A follow up
more.
To what I asked earlier is, do you think it would be a knee-jerk reaction if Detroit would make if they would make a move changing on their power play or in the lines? Do you think it would be a knee-jerk reaction, or do you think it's something that they just have to figure out here?
Based on what McLellan has done to this point, he took that first game against the Maple Leafs and just sat back and just said, let's see what this team is. And then saw what he saw, had a practice, reamed them out, and they became a whole different team. So it'll be interesting to see. I didn't see any tweets today, so I don't think they practiced. It'll be interesting to see when they return tomorrow what is said, if anything comes out from it, and what is potentially jumbled. I don't see the line changing because the lines have been good up until the last 2 games. I mean, like I said, they beat the Panthers on Thursday night 5-2. So, they're getting consistency from their offense. It's just they ran into, honestly, I want to say, some aside from Hellebuck and maybe 1 or 2 others, 2 of the other best goalies in hockey. I think the real change you'll see where things get jumbled around is if you lose tomorrow to the Flyers. If you come home from this road trip 1-3, you'll see some changes moved around as far as the lines are concerned. You come home 2-2, I think everybody kind of expected that. And then you got the teams that you really care about. You got Montreal again, the Lightning, the Kings, and then you head out on your Canadian road trip before the break for the 4 Nations. So you also just got Alex Lyon back on last night was his first game back. So was that also 4-1 game. A little rust because 3 of those goals were in the first period. And I forget when he last played. I want to say it was. Now I'm trying to find his name.
Yeah.
His last game was January 4th. Before that, at Winnipeg, and that was the game they won.
All right. Kind of a burning question for me right now, as you can see me nodding my head. With the way, like when you say that they've gotten consistency in their goal scoring, is that from the first line to the fourth line, or is that your goal scorers that you're expecting to produce?
Top six. The top six has been producing. I mean, Lucas Raymond and Patrick Kane was the third star of the week last week, and Lucas Raymond going into actually he didn't get a point yesterday, so he has a point in 17 of his last 12 games, and Kane has going into I don't know if this is before yesterday or after yesterday, he has 16 points in his last 10 games as well, on 6 goals. So, and those they both are on different lines. So that tells you you're seeing that from the top 2 lines. The games they were winning, you're finding goals where you'll see like Marco Kasper on the top line with Larkin and Raymond. He's been doing more. This has been my conversation for the longest time, and you'll see this in anything I write for the Red Wings. They need to find it in the bottom 6 if they're going to compete. And that's why I think we talked about it last week with the Cousins trade. Cousins will allow them, I think, to add to their bottom 6 that they will find more scoring.
That's if they were to add a guy like Cousins.
Right. Or anybody, I mean, really anybody on that they could add to their top 6. It allows them to move things around to find more scoring on the bottom half of their offensive lines.
That kind of answers my question, my next question for you is, I was going to say is that sustainable, having the top 6 scoring like they are and being like relied upon? Like you can even say with Winnipeg, who's got like 72 goals in their just their first line alone of 152, something like that.
When they first brought in McClellan, you saw a player like Jonathan Berggren take a step forward. I mean, I think he had 3 points in the first 3 games with McClellan, and he's kind of taken a step back. He scored a goal against Florida and an assist before that, but then it wasn't since January 2nd was his last goal. So he's a guy we saw take a step forward once McClellan came in, and he's taken a step back as of late, that if he can get going again, he can provide that secondary bottom 6 scoring that the Red Wings need.
And who knows? Maybe if the Red Wings get into a position to compete for that playoff spot, because you never know with the way that the Atlantic is looking right now. Maybe they look at the deadline or close to the deadline, and they're like, "Hey, our top 6 is great, but what we need is maybe a second line center and guys to complement us in that bottom 6."
Right now, I think McClellan, I agree with that. I think the other thing he's doing right now is because obviously he took over after a loss to the Blues. They lost to the Leafs, and then they went on a 7-game win streak. They lost to the Sharks. He saw them come out and beat the defending Stanley Cup champions. Now he's seen this team on a 2-game losing streak under him. I think he's going to take a step back and look at how does this team respond to the adversity. So if they come out tomorrow night against the Flyers and they put up 3-4 goals and they come home with a point, he's going to figure out right there, okay, this is what I need to fix this team. That's what I like about the fact that they brought in Todd McClellan to run them.
Okay. Oh, well, Chris, it's been a pretty nice time chatting hockey with you. It's got over the hour mark here, but I think that does it for us. It's episode 22. Yeah, 22. Well, hopefully it's the 3 of us next week, and I look forward to it. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Have a good week.